So, Katie Thomson, Deputy Administrator at the FAA, appointed Deputy Administrator in June 2023, a 30-plus year career in global aviation and transportation law and leadership experience to the agency. Previously served as Chief of Staff, where she was the key advisor to the Administrator and provided leadership, guidance, oversight and coordination of activities related to aviation policy and the Resource Management Programme. She oversaw and partnered with the agency's leadership on some of their most complex and controversial matters. Prior to joining the FAA, Katie was the Director of, I'll get this right, Bipartisan Infrastructure Law Implementation at the Department for Transportation, and in that capacity worked with external and internal stakeholders to successfully implement over $660 billion worth of new and expanded programs across all modes of transportation over the 5 years she was in post. That was Katie's second stint at the DOT, having rejoined from Amazon, where she was Vice President and Assistant Global Counsel of Worldwide Transportation and Sustainability. Before joining Amazon, Katie played a pivotal role in shaping national and international transportation law and policy as the General Counsel at the Department for Transport. I always make this mistake, I'm apologising for my Department for Transport moment, and was the Chief General Counsel at the FAA during the Obama administration. She served as a counsellor to the US Secretary of Transportation and was the DOT's first senior sustainability officer. During her time as counsellor, Katie led the DOT team that worked with the White House and the US Environmental Protection Agency to develop and implement historic joint fuel economy and greenhouse gas emission standards for cars and trucks. As you can see, she knows federal government very well. Prior to that, Katie was a partner in the environmental group at Sydney Austin in Washington, D.C., where she supported clients in all industrial sectors, and immediately prior to joining Amazon, she chaired the transportation practice group at Morrison Foerster, advising clients on emerging technologies in the transportation sector. She's a graduate of the Universities of Illinois and Pennsylvania, and is now going to set out the FAA's key priorities, innovation and sustainability goals for us all. Katie, a warm welcome to the Society.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. It's really a privilege for me to be here, and I want to thank Dave Edwards and the Royal Aeronautical Society for the warm welcome. It truly is a privilege to speak to the Royal Aeronautical Society, the oldest aeronautical society in the world, and an organization that gave its first gold medal to the Wright brothers. And I will say, as proud as we are of the Wright brothers in the United States, they certainly were very talented, but they were also very lucky. And I know that the UK was close on their heels, so we got really lucky with the Wright brothers. I'm also honored to be part of the lecture named for English aviation pioneer John Moore-Brabazon. I know that Lieutenant Colonel Moore-Brabazon was contributed immensely to civil aviation in the United Kingdom, including the critical role that he played in civil aviation planning after World War II. With that said, I'd like to talk a little bit about why I'm visiting the UK and other parts of Europe this week. My goal is to meet with key aviation stakeholders and sort of rekindle and build even stronger relationships with our European partners. As the regulatory authority in the United States for ensuring the safety and efficiency of America's national airspace system and the safety of American products flying around the globe, we know how essential it is to work with our partners here and on the continent. The FAA particularly values our enduring and strong relationship with the UK government, the Civil Aviation Authority, and of course, NATS. I think most of you probably already know this, but at least 25% of all transatlantic traffic is between our two nations, and 80% of all transatlantic flights go through UK airspace. FAA Administrator Whitaker, who is still relatively new in his role, would love to be making this trip right now, but he's staying at home in the United States to focus on some of our key safety initiatives that require his attention, and he asked me to make the trip on his behalf, not only to convey our appreciation for the relationship that we have, but also for me to have the chance, me and my colleagues at the FAA, to have the chance to talk with so many of our partners, share lessons learned, understand more about approaches in the UK and elsewhere in Europe, and talk about what we're doing and how we can better partner together. During my discussions this week, I am focused on helping advance our mutual interest and emphasizing 3 key areas that are priorities for the FAA. None of these should come as a surprise to you. First, of course, is safety. Safety, 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 always our #1 priority and our North Star. Innovation and sustainability, and I'll talk a little bit about those various issues before we do the fireside chat. Again, as I said, the foundation of what all of us do in the aviation sector is focused on safety, making sure that we maintain the safety of the airspace and also enhance the airspace. And we're doing hard work to make sure that we continue that in the United States, and I know all of you are focused on that as well. I want to give you a specific example, which is probably will sound familiar to you, and that is the ongoing work that we're doing with Boeing. We've had a number of challenges in different areas over the past year in the United States, one of the most recent of which is the Boeing aircraft that operated by Alaska Airlines, where the plug door exited the aircraft in flight. We've had continued focus on the Boeing MAX for a number of years, and this most recent incident called into question the quality of Boeing's production oversight. And we've done a number of things. First, of course, we had a temporary grounding of the aircraft so that we could better understand the issue and make sure that Boeing took appropriate actions, and airlines in turn could take appropriate actions to address the issue and make sure it wouldn't recur. But we also stepped up our oversight at Renton and the producer of the plug door, Spirit Aerosystems. We had a significant on-site presence at both locations for 6 weeks, and we did a deep dive audit to better understand all aspects of the production process. Around the same time, we also had a report issued by a group of experts on Boeing's SMS and safety culture, and they came out with a report and an extensive list of recommendations. So between the audit and the recommendations from that report, we in turn gave Boeing 90 days to come up with a corrective action plan, and we're checking in regularly. We've had our first check-in at 30 days. We're about to have our second check-in. And the purpose of the check-ins is to make sure they're developing their implementation plan and that it's robust and that it has specific performance metrics so that we can assess progress towards permanently addressing the audit findings and the recommendations in the report. We've also taken steps to limit production of the Boeing MAX aircraft during this time period, and those production limits will remain in place until we are fully satisfied that Boeing has corrected its production quality issues and is on a continuing path forward to make sure that all of its operations, from its design, its manufacturing, its maintenance of aircraft, meet the highest safety standards. The final report, corrective action plan, is due in May, and we are adamant that Boeing must manage and mature its SMS and also its quality management system. One of the things we did here this week is a desire for the United States FAA to share more information about our work with Boeing so there's greater transparency, and we are committed to doing that so that we can all learn from this particular experience and apply it in our respective context. Again, we are committed to international safety cooperation. It's important to keep all of our safety standards high, harmonized to the extent that we can, improve systems, and share expertise. The second area is innovation, and we're really excited. While we're kind of focused on nailing the basics on safety, we're also preparing the airspace for the future of aviation. And we want to ensure that new entrants like UAS, increased commercial space launches and reentries, and advanced air mobility have a place in our airspace. So some of the things that we're doing in this area include continued progress on the development of UAS traffic management, beyond visual line of sight approvals, which we expect to happen soon. We continue to certify U.S. commercial space companies who launch from foreign spaceports, including those in the United States. We're working on a bilateral commercial space transportation agreement with the UK. And I'm pleased to say our space partnership was strong and growing between the FAA and the UK CAA, with respective representatives traveling back and forth to better understand the work and the progress going on in their respective countries. We are on pace to certify the first AAM aircraft in 2025. We're really excited about that. And we currently have cross-validations underway between our two countries to support the certification of US and UK AAM aircraft in both countries. We also expect to finalize a rule that will set operating standards for these AAM, and we call it electric vehicle takeoff and landing rules, and that's a critical component. You need to be able to have aircraft you can certify, but you also need to have operating rules that will inform how those aircraft are operated. We're reading the UK's Future Flight Action Plan with great interest. The approach of identifying roles, responsibilities, and tasks across government, regulator, and industry is quite similar to what we're doing in the United States. And again, we look forward to the opportunities to learn from each other. We are talking regularly with the National Aviation Authorities Network, which is chaired by Sir Stephen Hillier of the UK CAA. The NAA includes leadership from Canada, Australia, New Zealand, as well as our administrator at the FAA, and our goal is to promote alignment and harmonization of AAM certification criteria. The third area I would be remiss if I didn't mention is our commitment to sustainability. Earlier this week in the United States, it was Earth Day, and it was another occasion for us to stop and reflect on the important work that we need to do collectively to sustain our planet and life on this planet. We have a number of things going on in this area. In 2021, we issued our U.S. Aviation Climate Action Plan, which establishes a goal of net zero greenhouse gas emissions from the U.S. aviation sector by 2050. It's a huge goal, and as I'm sure you all can appreciate, it's going to require big action to get there. We have an ongoing partnership with industry through our CLEAN program that helps manufacturers develop technologies to make future aircraft that use less fuel and are quieter. There's a cost-sharing element of that, which is a key to its success. We're also excited about our first competitive grants program for sustainable aviation fuels and technology. We call it the FAST grant program, and it was created under the Inflation Reduction Act. It gives us $291 million to invest in the production and deployment of sustainable aviation fuels and sustainable aviation technologies, and these will be, took competitive grant applications. They came in November of last year, and we expect to make the first selections under that program in later this summer, and we're really excited about that. Just like safety, sustainability is a team sport, and we continue to work closely with our DFT colleagues on ICAO initiatives like the third conference on aviation and alternative fuels that was held in Dubai last November. And our collaboration with the UK continues, and I know that the UK was instrumental in leading the conference to agree on a near-term vision to reduce the CO2 intensity of international aviation fuels by 5% by 2030. I also read with interest the UK government SAF mandate announcement, which I believe was today, maybe yesterday. I'm losing track of time with all my travel. But it is just another example of the UK's bold leadership on aviation safety and sustainability, and we really value that. I also had the pleasure of being at JFK Airport in New York to welcome the first commercial aircraft flight flown by Virgin Atlantic, and it was really just exciting to hear from the crew and from the passengers on that flight about the experience. It was seamless, it was beautiful to watch it land, and it was just a really exciting moment to think about the prospects for sustainable aviation fuels in the future. Before we get to our conversation, I'd like to make just one more point, and I think it's something that all of us can relate to, which is the challenges we have in recruiting, retaining, and developing talent in the aviation sector. Administrator Whitaker and I, whenever we go out and talk to groups, particularly groups of young people, we encourage them to explore the possibilities of aviation, whether you're a lawyer like I am, you're an accountant, you have an interest in being a pilot, an air traffic controller, a data analyst. We need good talent, and I know all of you do too. So the more that we can do to spark an interest, plant a seed, and encourage people to go into aviation-related fields, the better it is all for us. And one of the things we love to do is tell them the stories that inspire so many of us, like the example of the Wright brothers and Amelia Earhart. And there's a great example in the United States of a young woman named Bessie Coleman, who was the first African-American, Native American pilot to be licensed. And Bessie, at a very young age, left the United States to come to France because it was the only place where she could obtain a pilot license. So those are some stories that inspire us and really motivate us to bring others into the industry. With that, I'll conclude, but I just want to thank you all for being here tonight, and thank everyone I've had the chance to talk to, and I'll have the chance to talk to after our conversation. Because I learn a lot by being out in the field, seeing things, meeting people, listening, and learning. So thank you for your presence tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think you set a very good scene of where the FAA is at the moment. As I said before to you, I think it would be probably quite useful for some of the people in the room to just understand how the FAA is structured compared to probably the CAA and EASA, which we might be more, or some of us might be more familiar with. Huge nation, 45,000 flights a day, I think, which is more than Europe as a continent develops. Obviously 330 million people over there to fly well, not every day, but to get flying. Just tell me a little bit more about the FAA and the structure and how it actually works. This is our fireside chat.
It's nice and cozy tonight.
This is when I start sweating.
That's a great question. So there are about 45,000 employees of the Federal Aviation Administration. And one of the things that is relatively unique about us is that we combined our air traffic control operations with our aviation safety operations. We have additional lines of business as well, but I know a lot of countries can keep those two things separate because one is sort of operational and one is the safety regulator, and I think some countries have legitimate concerns about conflating those two. Ours was intentional by design, and we have found that it really has helped to have the safety regulators and the safety culture and safety management systems mentality embedded into our air traffic organization. It's not always seamless because we are both the regulator and the operator, and our regulator side has to oversee our operator side, but there are greater synergies and understanding, and we can take a look across the system at a broader set of risks, and as an agency try to manage and mitigate those risks in a collaborative, coordinated way that helps us prioritize and manage those risks in a smart way. We have a decentralized, we have a headquarters, but we also have a lot of field offices. So for example, our airports division has regional offices all over the country, and our aviation safety office has our CMOs, which are the organizations that oversee individual carriers. We also have smaller offices around the country that oversee general aviation. I think that's a big difference between the United States and Europe, is the number of general aviation aircraft and pilots that we have in the system that require sort of more direct sort of oversight and control and support to ensure their level of safety. So those are some sort of fundamental examples of the way that we are structured at the FAA. We also have regional administrators, and the purpose of the regional administrator in each of the different regions of the country is to be a direct line to our headquarters, so they know sort of what our policy and issues are, what our major rulemakings are, what are some of the areas of congressional interest, and they're able to engage directly at the community level, state and local level, to better understand community concerns and be a feedback loop to headquarters. So we try not to miss any critical sources of information in that way.
Do those regional areas operate as individual, not quite business units, or how does that work? Because I'm thinking if you kind of give it to the analogy of Europe, where you've still got the national authorities as well under EASA, which does bring in some interpretation issues. Do you have the same in America, or is it a lot more
So our
defined?
regional administrators are part of the FAA organization, and they are based out of our policy office. And they used to be based out of our finance office, which oversees sort of our aeronautical center and our tech center. But we decided that because they're so closely aligned with policy and they need to understand sort of the high-level objectives and initiatives of the agency, they reside in our policy office and report up through our policy office in headquarters.
Okay. We've got next week, I'll probably spoil it for the people who will be here next week, but we have the Civil Aviation Authority coming in to give their annual address, which is stakeholder engagement for them. The joys of having a library, we own the National Aerospace Library down at Farnborough, is that I'm able to turn to the librarian to say, have you got the notes of events that have taken place here? So we were going back through the minutes of a meeting that took place in 1971, again, before I was born. And I wish. Oh, no, it was, yes. And part of that was a sort of a meeting of minds of the stakeholders, the industry, with the then regulator. So this was 1 month before the CAA actually formed. And I was reading the conclusions. I always find it quite useful to get to the end of the document to see what we were worried about 52 years ago. And it said, and again, spoiling this, you'll hear this again next week if you come back, but it was the value of aviation and aerospace needed to be fully understood, that we needed to encourage greater air-mindedness in the general public. And there was a hint at sustainability it was more to do with the economics.
It's interesting.
Yeah, and I suppose coming back to your sort of main priorities at the moment of safety, sustainability and talent, which of those which of that is right at the top of the agenda? Which is the most critical of that for the FAA right at the moment?
It will always be safety, because if we don't put safety at the top of the list, then we are not going to have an aviation sector and an aviation industry. It is really important that we all continue to deliver a safe aircraft, safe pilots, safe air traffic controllers, safe technology, in order for aviation to continue to be viable. And, you know, I will say happily, our safety record is one that we intentionally made. We have all collectively focused on how we continue to improve safety. Secretary Buttigieg, we were talking about the budget announcement a couple months ago for FAA, and we were getting lots of questions about why are we seeing all these things in the system, and is aviation still safe? And he said emphatically, aviation is safe, and just reflect on the difference between the safety in aviation and the safety situation on the road. And in the United States, we have roughly 40,000 fatalities on our roads every single year. If we had that in the aviation area, we would not be flying planes today. And so it's important to have the confidence of the flying public to sustain and maintain and grow our industry. And then I would say secondarily, sustainability is important, because for all of us, and it's not just aviation, we need to be good stewards of the environment, and we need to reduce our footprint without compromising safety, and I wholeheartedly believe it can be done. I think it's largely an economic issue more than it is a technology issue, and it's a public acceptance question of, where some parts of the world think sustainability is really important. Others, the developing world, thinks that the developed countries should carry the burden, but I think for all of us, it's just a critical element of ensuring the growth of our industry.
On sustainability, correct me on this, but you're committed as an aim as a US government to getting to 100% SAF by 2050?
Well, to net zero emissions by 2050.
Okay.
And so that's through a combination of measures. SAF will be a principal element of it, but it will be through, aircraft design and other things like that.
There's I can't remember the name of the plan, but the Green Growth Plan that the US came up with. It's the Department for Energy.
I will say we've got a lot of green sustainability initiatives on, and one of the things I will say about the current government and leadership under President Biden is that we do have a whole of government approach. So we are doing lots of things, not necessarily individually as departments and agencies, but in collaboration. And part of that is the sustainability work that we are doing with the Department of Transportation on SAF and the FAST grants that I mentioned, but also working with the State Department and other governments in ICAO to continue to implement CORSIA and ultimately create more stringent standards that the world will adhere to through CORSIA.
Skills. Where do you think the biggest challenge we've got is? Is it? I spend a lot of time talking to a lot of people about the challenge of finding the next generation. Personally, I don't think it's that the next generation isn't there and interested in this. I just think we're not talking very collaboratively and together in the same way to each other. Do you see that in the States? I mean, I've seen and I've met lots of incredibly inspirational people in a way that most Brits, we're not that great at inspiration. We don't have the fight some days, but there are some people who, you would drag you over the edge of a cliff with their initiatives. Incredibly positive, but is there a sort of national joined up strategy towards inspiring kids to look towards the future of aviation?
We partner a lot with the aviation sector in the United States, but and you hear a lot across our federal government about the importance of training and development opportunities, not necessarily specific to aviation, but one of the things you mentioned about my resume is that for 2 years I had the privilege of leading implementation of the infrastructure law, which gave us $660 billion to invest in all modes of transportation. And one of the critical elements of that is in all of our grant programs that were discretionary grant programs, we had workforce standards in it, so that to be eligible for a grant award, you had to commit to a number of measures that would advance labor and workforce interests, including workforce training. Again, not specific to aviation, but it was just a broader approach to making sure that the investments that the federal government is making are really supporting the specific thing, like, for example, transportation safety, but also the communities in which the money is being invested, so that they're holistic. For FAA, we have a number of programs and partnerships, grant programs for mechanics and for pilots, but we really try to get children at a younger age interested in our STEM AVSED programs, and we try to give them the opportunity to see themselves in the aviation system. So you don't have to be a pilot, you don't have to be an air traffic controller, but do you like to build things? You could work on airport construction projects, runway construction projects. Are you a data analysis? We're always trying to get smarter about using data to better identify and mitigate risks. So I think it's providing the context and making sure people can see themselves in it, whatever it is they like, and having people express interest in them and tell them about the possibilities. Because a lot of people sort of self-select, self-disqualify themselves because they're like, well, I don't know, I'm not interested in flying a plane, I don't have the right skills or the right background, and we really need to focus on the possibilities.
Is that skills shortage actually something that's visible and tangible in the States at the moment?
The skill shortage?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So air
And
traffic
impacting
air
businesses.
traffic controllers, I don't know how many people have been following in the United States, but between COVID and a number of, some significant government shutdowns, we have lost a number of air traffic controllers due to retirements, and we haven't kept pace with hiring needs. So we are now almost doing a hiring sprint so that we can maximize our air traffic controller hiring over the next 3 years and maintain that pipeline so that we don't find ourselves in that same situation again. We need inspectors, we need mechanics, we need lawyers. I know that the airlines need pilots and mechanics as well, that across the aviation sector, there is a significant need for new talent. The other thing that we are seeing is that as a result of COVID, we do have a lot of new people who have joined, which is great, but they don't have the experience, and they probably haven't had the history of how we came to be so safe in the aviation sector. And it's incumbent on all of us to pass along, share, develop them to appreciate and value safety management systems and safety culture, because, as I said, it's really a happy circumstance that they haven't seen some of these significant, fatal, devastating crashes. But if they haven't seen it, they can be assumptions that the system is safe, and there's not anything more that they need to do other than do their specific job.
Just coming back to production oversight, which you mentioned before, what's the change in the FAA on production oversight? Having delivered aircraft in a previous life quite a lot, and seeing how OEMs worked with the FAA, things have changed. What's it look like these days? Is it a lot more? Are you there all the time? Are you providing constant oversight? I mean, without too many specifics.
We have a much more significant presence there, but FAA, and I don't think any civil aviation authority, will have sufficient resources to be everywhere all at once, and that's why safety really is a team sport, and we all need to step up and do the right thing. But I think we need to look at it through a different lens. Like, we think and hope, we make the rules, we set the policies, we do our periodic oversight, and we trust that people will do the right things. But we need to continue to stay on top of it, because Boeing is a really good example of where I think they did all the right things from the perspective of putting it in manuals and writing it down and creating a governance structure. But they didn't do the right thing because it didn't get down from the more senior levels to the people on the floor. And there was a disconnect between, my job is to do this, without an appreciation for how they fit into the safety culture and how every single person on that floor contributes to safety. And that is, Boeing, I think, and hope that it's learned its lesson, but it's a cautionary tale for all of us that we all have to be focused on safety. We all have to be living and breathing the safety culture every day. We have to have voluntary reporting programs where people can report without fear of retribution. It really takes active, intentional engagement every day to ensure that we maintain and hopefully build on this legacy of safety that all of us have worked so hard to get to.
Space.
Mm-hmm.
You're the space regulator in the States.
We license space launches.
Okay. And how is, you're seeing it more actively perhaps than we are over here at the moment, but we've got lots of potential, lots of satellites, launch sites opening up on the UK as well very shortly. What are you learning from that? What's the interesting side of the space conundrum look like to the FAA?
I think several things. First, as we see an increasing number of commercial space launches in the United States, we're seeing more congestion in our airspace. Particularly, Florida is a really good example where the weather tends to be better in Florida, so a lot of space launches want to leave from Florida. We also have high general aviation traffic in Florida, and we have a lot of people who want to fly commercial aircraft to get to Florida. So one of our major challenges is, well, the other thing I would say is the military also likes to do its exercises, naval and Air Force exercises in Florida for the same reasons, pretty decent weather. And so we have a lot of demand for a limited amount of airspace. And what we are trying to do is focus on how we better optimize the airspace so that everyone can sort of maximize the use of that airspace. So a lot of it has been clarifying policies on the commercial space side. A good example is a policy that we put out, really a guidance document that encourages space launches to take place off-peak hour if it's not a national security critical, military driven. So that we encourage them to launch after hours to reduce the size of their hazard area, and the hazard area is the protected space where you anticipate that if there is debris from the launch, it will not go outside those hazard areas. So to be more predictive about their hazard area and shrink it as much as possible, and limit the time that the airspace is closed off. So we had some launches about a year ago that were locking off airspace for up to 6 hours when they only needed really 3. And so those are some examples of how we're trying to manage that. The other is the United States government is very interested in spurring innovation and being a global leader when it comes to commercial space activities. And so we currently are prohibited from regulating passenger safety for people traveling to outer space, and we call it the learning period, so that commercial space companies can learn through their launches. And Elon Musk is a really good example, who probably every other launch blows up a plane and thinks it's a great opportunity to learn, and happily he's got a deep pocket, so it works out well for him. But really to be ready when the time is right to have a framework and approach for how we might regulate passenger safety for passengers traveling into space on commercial space flights. And then the other thing I would say is a big challenge in the United States is a bit of a tussle over who should own what part of commercial space. So we've got the Department of Commerce, we've got NASA, we've got DOD, we have DOT, FAA. I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but everybody is so excited about it and everybody wants to do everything. And so part of it is figuring out what the appropriate roles and responsibilities are. And the White House Space Council has been coordinating a lot of that interagency dialogue.
Excellent. Okay. We're going to come to the crowd very shortly. I'd say whenever we do anything on eVTOL, it's probably the thing that makes my post bag fill up the most. We have people who think it will happen, people who think it won't happen. Probably don't want to get into the specifics of that this evening because we haven't got a great deal of time left. The one thing that does come out of it for me is the harmonisation aspect, and it's plugging the President's paper that we're working on at the moment on safety of eVTOLs. This is probably the chance for the first time really in all of our lifetimes for legislation to be brought together at an international level with a much fresher approach than the way that we've all learnt together over the past 100 years. Are you seeing, you mentioned it before about the global context to it. Is that embedding itself in everything that happens with discussions on regulations of eVTOL?
I think the effort to harmonize standards across many countries is something that we typically try to do. I think it's absolutely essential in this airspace that we may not have perfect alignment, but we have the same sort of collective vision and framework that we can execute. Because to really take advantage of the opportunities that AAM has to offer at scale, we need to have a fairly consistent approach. Businesses need a fairly consistent approach. Our interests are all aligned. I think the difference is, the degree to which different countries are willing to accept risk and what each country will deem to be a sufficient level of safety. And that's where the coordination and the sharing of data in an effort to the extent we can to harmonize is really critical. The other piece of it is it's not just aviation. So you have, takeoff and landing locations that mostly probably will not be on airports. So you have a lot of community impacts that people are worried about noise, they're worried about volume, public acceptance, cybersecurity, huge risk that we need to all think about. And that's not unique to AAM, but that's something that we need to think about. Coordinating air traffic control. We're all really excited about the opportunities for increased use of drones, introduction of AAM, but we've got to figure out air traffic management, and I think there's a lot of great opportunity for global collaboration on how we think and approach air traffic management.
Excellent. Okay, your opportunity to ask questions. So if you've got something to say, please do put your hand up and wait for the microphone so that we can record you for posterity.
I wanted to ask, you talked about the difficulty with air traffic controls and the number of retirements during COVID and everything. Obviously, if you follow incidents, it looks like we're getting an increasing, or should I say, in the US, you're getting an increasing number of incidents. I just wondered, from where you're sitting, are you getting the data that shows an increasing number of incidents? And, apart from the hiring of new air traffic controllers, what can you do to bring that number down?
Great question. I would say, as a general matter, we are not seeing an overall increase in the number of significant events. However, let's take runway incursions and close calls over the past year. The overall number has been down, but the significance of them has increased. And it's not attributable to one factor. It's not air traffic controllers, it's not just pilots, it's not just troubles like lack of sufficient signage or indication on runways. There are a variety of causes. But the two principal causes we see are the things that I described early. Demand has really returned to pre-COVID rates. We have a lot of new people in the system, and we've got a lot of congestion in the system, and certainly in our big urban areas in the United States. So what we've tried to do is, take a methodical, thoughtful approach to assessing the contributing factors. Again, air traffic controller hiring, we know that's an issue. We've really stepped up our efforts to get maximized throughput through our academy in Oklahoma City. But we're doing things like ongoing recruitment from the military. For some reason, we only used to recruit twice a year from military veterans who were retiring. And we discovered that, well, that just doesn't make any sense. They retire all the time, and aren't we losing opportunities? We're also partnering with what we call collegiate training academies to provide comparable training to our air traffic control training academy. And that means I think we have something like 19, maybe more than that have signed on and committed to providing a comparable level of training to what we provide at the academy, so we can dramatically increase the number of air traffic controllers. But it's not limited to air traffic controllers. It's pilots, it's instances like Boeing where they're just not sufficiently focused on safety. And that's why one of the things that we are trying to do, and Administrator Whitaker is particularly interested in doing it, is both within FAA and with our external partners, including countries like the UK, is can we share data, or can we share data or if we're already sharing data, can we share it in a more useful way where we can be more predictive across the entire system, as opposed to looking at individual, slices of the system, and continue to get smarter about managing risk.
One at the back there.
Thanks very much. John Vincent from IFA. We're living through a particularly troubled period at the moment, with a number of conflicts going on in the world. Security situation, cybersecurity perhaps, is a very important consideration. You mentioned sharing safety data, but at an international level, do we have to work extra hard to overcome those barriers that are being erected really to sharing that safety data? And how might we do that? Sorry, that's a big question.
You probably hit the nail on the head, because I think we have we individually and collectively have a wealth of data. And what the administrator has sort of charged us doing at the FAA is exploring the art of the possible. And that is, one, what data are other countries using? How are they using it? how can we share that? Are there legal barriers? What are those legal barriers? How can we resolve those legal barriers? Are there labor union concerns about, sharing information across borders? How do we address those issues? So it seems almost like a no-brainer that we absolutely should share, but I think that the question that you posed is, what are the potential impediments? And that's one thing that we want to do is look at the potential impediments and what the potential solutions are. And I expect that we'll do this in an iterative basis, like we're looking internally first to see what information do we have. And just by way of example, we've got several different lines of businesses that gather safety information, and they all were using a different definition of significant safety event. Like, well, how can I tell ATO versus our aviation safety office versus airports? Like, shouldn't we have a common share? So starting internally and looking at opportunities to add enhancements, gather data, partner more externally to enrich the data set and better inform our safety risk assessments collectively.
Tim was first, I'm afraid. You have to be quick with your hands.
Okay. Tim Robinson, Aerospace Magazine at the Aeronautical Society. Just wondering, not only Boeing, but you also have United Airlines under sort of special oversight and safety concerns. So I'm just wondering whether, are you worried that this sort of lip service to safety is spread throughout the US air transport system, and that now you're going to be finding other Boeings in Tier 2, Tier 3 suppliers, regional airlines, business jet operators, that you're just going to keep uncovering, lapses? Thanks.
No, I'm not worried that it's spreading throughout the system, but I think this is a really good example. We'll set Boeing aside because I think we were even surprised by by what we experienced in January. But the way we identified United was we regularly check on the performance of our carriers through our CMOs. And we saw a deviation, an uptick for United Airlines, and said, okay, there seems to be something going on here, let's look a little closer. So I think that's really a good example of using the data to inform where we're investing our time and resources. But no, I don't see it something as a system-wide issue.
He was first, okay. It's a new game we're playing this evening. Fastest finger first.
Richard Amlinghammer from Mikos Technologies. Different question about Boeing, still about Boeing. They've been hemorrhaging money over the last few years over their issues, and that's likely to lead to a far more risk-averse approach to everything. So how are they going to innovate, and how can you encourage them to innovate in those circumstances?
Who's been hemorrhaging money? I'm sorry.
Boeing.
Oh, Boeing. Look, I'm not particularly worried about Boeing's economic situation. We are very worried about their ability to consistently produce a high quality, safe product. And to our mind, if Boeing can't do that, then Boeing doesn't have a business. They currently have the resources, they have the capability, and they can do it if they choose to do it. And I think for all of our benefit, like we all really hope that Boeing can be successful because we have only two major aircraft manufacturers in the world. Their demand is high, and we really need both. But it's incumbent on Boeing to demonstrate that it can consistently produce safe, reliable aircraft, regardless of the circumstances, or they shouldn't be in business.
Yeah, the front, yeah.
Hello, Martin Hawley from Airspace Unlimited. We develop tools to help people optimize airspace. And my question is we've been looking a little bit at the US and how airspace works there. And if you compare it with Europe, whereas the concept of the flexible use of airspace and special use airspace it's booked in advance, it's shared with flight planning systems in airlines. And I just wondered, is it in your mind, or are you doing it already, looking at how European practices work and whether they might serve the US?
Yes, we do. The head of our air traffic organization, Tim Morrell, regularly meets with his counterparts around the world. He was recently in Europe, and he's very involved with CANSO, and we learn a lot from those engagements with our international partners, and we like to share what our experience is too. And one of the things that we do is what we call collaborative decision making, which is we bring stakeholders in who are using a particular area of airspace, and we try to better understand the issues and the impacts, and try to come to some sort of understanding about the needs and propose solutions. And that's an example of something that we've learned through international engagement and our ongoing engagement at home too.
Yeah, in the front row here. You were first. My eyesight's not working anymore. So.
Max Kingsley-Jones from Cirium. Going back to the MAX accidents in 2018 and 19 and the scrutiny that came out of those, one of the areas that was examined very closely was what I think the FAA calls change product rule, or grandfather rights. And subsequently, all the derivative aeroplanes Boeing's building have been delayed for certification, so MAX 7, MAX 10, 777X. So two questions really. One, when we ask Boeing about when they're going to get certification, they say ask the FAA because it's up to them, rightly so. So that's my first question. I've got the FAA I can ask you. And the second question is, do you think that the scrutiny that you're applying now to change product is going to negate the ability to develop derivative aeroplanes from a development cost perspective in the future? So will that put people off going around the derivative approach to aircraft development rather than all new?
Boeing is correct that we will ultimately decide when it's appropriate to certificate, but it's dependent on Boeing giving us the information that we need to make the necessary safety determination. And this is not, I would say this is not unique to Boeing. We often have companies saying, I'd have my type certificate by X date if it weren't for the FAA. We are not perfect, but we do depend on complete, accurate, reliable information to make our type certificate determinations. And so it really is incumbent on working in partnership with the FAA to make sure that the company applying understands what our expectations are, what they need to do to demonstrate that they are worthy of receiving type certification, and also engaging regularly to make sure we are getting the information that we need.
And you haven't got any of it yet for the MAX 7, MAX 10?
We have some.
You haven't got sufficient?
Well, not yet. Your second question is, no, I don't think it should discourage anybody from, second generation evolution of a product, but I think it does emphasize the importance of making sure you make the safety case. And also I will say, it may be, and we are all, thinking through this now, is there a point at time in which you should go back and seek a new certification? So the 737's been around since I think the late 60s, and is there some point in time where the FAA or maybe another CAA or EASA says, what, maybe it's time to go back and do a fresh look, start to, nose to tail.
Yeah.
If Trump wins the election in November, how do you think, would things change for the FAA, and would that be a concern?
I will say that the FAA is like laughing. It's like I took a deep breath. No, I will say that the FAA has an extraordinary cadre of committed public servants who are highly skilled and focused on doing the right thing for safety and for the American people. And that will never change. So the political, you may see politicals come and go, but the core career people at FAA stay the course. It is helpful when you have an administration that supports them in doing that their duty, but even if they don't, they will carry on.
One more. Well, there's three more hands up, okay. Our future president.
Richard Gearing. You talked about innovation, and we see a lot of talk about artificial intelligence and, the predictability of that. They don't, they learn as systems. So How is the FAA approaching that in sort of regulation terms? Is it about evolving your current regulation approach, or do you need to do something new?
We are taking a crawl, walk, run approach. So we are first focused on getting AAM type certificated and our operational rules out that would require piloted aircraft. But we are also trying to build in the flexibilities and learn so we can put ourselves on a path to certifying, more highly automated aircraft over time, and aircraft that are using, dependent on AI. I think it's an exciting but challenging journey for all of us, and I don't know that any country has an answer yet, but that's going to require a lot more discussion, collaboration to take advantage of the opportunities that presents, but also deal, I think, with the real societal challenges that most of us face. And how do you convince the public that automation and the use of AI is, number one, safe, and number two, isn't compromising their privacy in some way. And we just don't have the answers. I don't think anybody does, but we'll continue to work through those issues.
Time for one more very quick question. So one more at the back, the very back, I think. Sorry. Pantomime season's begun.
Thank you very much. I'm Sally Gethin. I'm an aviation journalist, and I do a lot of commentary for the broadcasters as well, particularly on the Boeing topic. But actually, I wanted to ask you something a bit different about the role of women, actually, in aerospace and aviation. And, what is the FAA doing to encourage that and actually promote diversity across the board, including people who might even, also have other issues, and the disabled, for example. What can the industry do to bring in greater talent from all parts of society?
Well, I will say the FAA has a number of initiatives to expand our outreach and recruitment of women and diverse candidates. And we are seeing some success, not at the pace that we would like to see, but I'll give you just one really good example. We continue to have a high percentage of white males who are air traffic controllers and who apply to be air traffic controllers. And I think we were talking to Nats earlier today, and I think they're seeing similar percentages. But one of the things that we discovered, which shouldn't have surprised us, is we weren't, in our recruitment tools, we weren't targeting a broader audience. So last year, I think we got a bit smarter, and when we opened our general recruitment for our air traffic controllers, we used social influencers. So we used young women, we used an African-American male, we used a Hispanic woman, to really kind of target different people and say, look, you can see yourselves in the air traffic organization, and this is a good career opportunity. But I also think it goes back what we were talking about earlier. Plant the seeds early, and whether you're a woman, a man, whatever your ethnicity, whatever your background is, plant the seeds and encourage people to take the chances. And the other thing that I often say to people is, when I started my legal practice, and even in some of the roles I've had at the Department of Transportation, there weren't a lot of women. I mean, still at the FAA, I don't think we have nearly as many women as we should. And it's really important to find sponsors and mentors who will support you in whatever you do. And two of my most important mentors have been men, and they've worked with me, they've gotten to know me, they've said, you can do this, of course you can, you're not going to fail, and so I think it's that kind of look to bring other people along. And then the bottom line, I'll say, is that's important not only because it's the right thing to do from a social perspective, it's the right thing to do from a safety perspective. Because if I had 10 people just like me sitting here on stage, and we were talking about a problem, and we shared a background, and you grew up in the same town, went to the same college, had the same interests, we're going to come up with the exact same solution. And we need to have robust, active conversations and debate to get at the heart of the issues and explore the range of options. And I truly believe, and I've seen it play out, that you only get those kinds of optimal results when you have diverse contributors.
The joys of being the CEO is I get to ask the last question.
Oh.
And the fact it's videoed means that we do get different demographics watching our videos. And I like to end on a really easy question for you. Would 10-year-old Katie think you were doing this job?
Absolutely not. But 10-year-old Katie loved to learn and read and explore the world through books. And so I was always intrigued by, you know, the cultures of other countries, history, you know, art, you name it. And what I've learned over time, and it's still true today, I will take a new job, take a new challenge if I can learn something and if I can contribute something. And if one thing I would take away is don't be afraid to fail. Most likely you're going to succeed, but my God, the fun you have in trying is just incredible.
Excellent, brilliant, thank you. It's a joy to be in this role to ask questions to people who do amazing things, so thank you very much for giving up your time and coming to see us. I can give you a list of the people who've sat on this stage and talked before you, and it's pretty exemplary.
Well,
so
thank you for having me. It's been a great experience.
Thank you very much. As ever, social outside in the Marshall of Cambridge room on the way out, but thank you very much, Katie, for being with us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.